All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Chris Williams, and as the Outreach and Dissemination Director for the SAKI Training and Technical Assistance Team, I will be your host today. But before we get started, I'm going to review a few housekeeping items for you. If technical support is needed, please let us know through the chat. Patrick will be our technical host today and will assist with any challenges that may arise. I also want to draw your attention to the live transcript button located within your own screen Zoom controls. You can use this feature to turn captioning services on and off. If you have any questions for our presenters regarding today's material, please submit them using the Q&A feature. While our presenters may address questions during the presentation, we will have time for Q&A at the end of the session. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we plan to share the recording in a PDF of the slides used as part of this webinar to all who have registered for today's event. This is the SAKI TTA webinar titled National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, Fiscal Year 2023 Grantee Orientation, presented by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the SAKI Training and Technical Assistance Team at RTI International. Joining us today from BJA, we have from the Policy Office, Dr. Angela Williamson, the Supervisor of BJA's Forensics Unit and FBI VICAP Liaison, and Carrie Hendricks, a policy advisor within BJA's Forensics Unit. You'll also hear from Lauren Troy, Mila Hago, and Tiffany Johnston, all three of which are grant management specialists from BJA's Programs Office. Without further ado, I will turn the mic over to Carrie Hendricks.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Chris. As Chris indicated, my name is Carrie Hendricks, and I am a policy advisor with the BJA Policy Office. I work closely with Dr. Angela Williamson to provide policy-related guidance and oversight to the SAKI programs. This afternoon, we will cover an introduction to OJP and BJA, an overview of program requirements, an overview of best practices for grants management, as well as other resources you may find beneficial. We thank you in advance for your time today, and we are ready to get started. So what is the Office of the Justice Programs? OJP provides grant funding, training, and research to the criminal justice community. OJP is one of three grant-making components of DOJ, along with the Office of Violence Against Women and the Office of Community-Oriented Policing. BJA is a component of OJP and was created in 1984 to reduce violent crime, create safer communities, and reform our nation's criminal justice system. BJA strengthens the criminal justice system by helping state, local, and tribal jurisdictions reduce and prevent violent crime. BJA focuses its programmatic and policy efforts on providing a wide range of resources, including training and technical assistance, to law enforcement, courts, corrections, treatment, and reentry providers to address chronic and emerging criminal justice challenges nationwide. Our esteemed director is Carlton Moore. BJA supports the field by investing in diverse funding streams, educating the field on emerging research, equipping agencies with tools and products to build capacity, and by providing and partnering with local communities in our endeavor to reduce violent crime nationwide. Now we will go through a quick overview of the program, and I will then transition to the programs team for the balance of the presentation. The National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative is the creation of a multidisciplinary response that ensures the just resolution of violent cold case crimes, particularly those that are sexually motivated, through a victim-centered approach. This program, with our 6 purpose areas, provides funding to support multidisciplinary response teams to inventory, track, and test previously unsubmitted sexual assault kits, which includes partially tested kits and secondary evidence as appropriate. We provide funding to collect and test lawfully owed DNA from offenders, and we also support the development of policies related to arrestee DNA collection as well. We provide resources to produce necessary protocols and policies to improve collaboration amongst laboratories, police, prosecutors, and victim service providers. And we also provide resources to address the sexual assault investigations and prosecutions that result from evidence and codicits produced by sexual assault kit testing. We allow and encourage the optimization of victim notification protocols and services. And finally, with Purpose Area 6, we are also now providing resources for other violent cold case crimes as well, which is very promising for the field. The SAKI program is an ever-evolving program to ensure agencies have the resources they need to best work violent cold case crimes. The policy team welcomes you to the program and encourages you to reach out anytime you may need us. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Neela for her to take you through the grant program requirements.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry, for the introduction and an overview of OJP, BCA, and the SAKI program. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Neela Hago. Thank you so much for joining us on the SAKI Welcome webinar today. I am joined by my colleagues, Lauren Choi and Tiffany Johnston, and together with a grants management specialist overseeing the SAKI program. And the three of us are situated in the program's office at the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So some of our responsibilities at the program's office include processing the initial applications to ensure that they're complete, working with the grantees during the award acceptance process, reviewing and approving performance and financial reports, reviewing and approving any modification requests to the award, and conducting in-depth monitoring of the awards. And some of the topics we will discuss in the next few slides, and although we try to include the most pertinent information we wanted to share with you, I'm sure we left some things out. So please don't hesitate to ask us questions at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. We also include some important links throughout the presentation and at the end of the presentation. And of course, as Chris mentioned, as with other webinars, this one will be recorded and available for future viewing. Next slide, please. So before I hand it off to Lauren to talk us through the SAKI award conditions, we wanted to hear from you first through this quick poll. So is there an award condition that your agency has the most questions on or has been struggling to address as you work through them? The choices are certification of inventory, budget clearance, the National Environmental Policy Act or NEPA, or indirect costs. And we will give you all a chance to answer. All right, Chris, let's see the results. Okay. So it sounds like the certification of inventory is the one that folks are struggling with a little bit or maybe need some additional information on, followed by budget clearance and the NEPA withholding. So thankfully, we will address all of them today, but we can also follow up with you after. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Neela. So a big portion of your award package are the award conditions. First, there are standard award conditions that are applied to all grant programs administered by OJP. As there are many, we wanted to highlight a few of them here. Your agency should ensure they are compliant with the completion of the OJP Financial Management and Grant Administration Training, 28 CFR Part 46, and all OJP policies and procedures regarding the protection of human research subjects, in compliance with the award condition that states all subawards require federal authorization. Next, there are other award conditions specific to the SAKI program, such as the withholding of funds for completed inventory, which states that the recipient may not obligate, expend, or draw down more than 25% of the total eligible award amount until a completed inventory and/or certification of a completed inventory has been provided to BJA. For first-time grantees, your RTI regional lead will reach out and work with you to address this requirement. For returning grantees, while you may have an inventory form completed and approved under a previous award, you must still work with your RTI regional lead to address this award condition to ensure updated information related to your inventory has been collected and the inventory is verified. Grant recipients under Purpose Area 6 will also have to complete the National Cold Case Initiative inventory. Another program-specific award condition is the withholding of funds for the National Environmental Policy Act, also known as the NEPA award condition. A representative from the clerk group will have already reached out to you directly on the requirements of this award condition and what is needed to comply with it. Next, it is important to note that almost all new awards will have some withholding award conditions placed on the awards. By now, your grant manager will have reached out to you with a list of those withholding award conditions and what is required to address them. Please do not begin any programmatic or financial activity on the award until these withholding award conditions have been addressed, as these costs will be deemed unallowable. We'll cover some of the other award conditions in more detail later on in this presentation, but as Mila referenced, if you have any questions regarding your award conditions, please reach out to myself or Mila. Next slide, please. So when you accept your award, you agree to comply with all the BJA reporting requirements, and you are responsible for submitting several different types of reports. They are performance reports, and these reports are completed in the Performance Management Tool System, PMT, and submitted into JEST grants. The second type of report is the Federal Financial Reports, or FFRs, which are due quarterly and submitted into JEST grants. We'll cover a bit more on these requirements in the next few slides. However, it's important to note that if you are non-compliant with either of these reporting requirements, JEST grants will automatically freeze your funds until those reports are submitted. Please also note that delinquent reports count negatively toward your status as a grantee during risk assessment. So please do everything you can to submit these reports on time. Next slide, please. The next reporting requirement is the Federal Financial Reporting Requirement, or FFRs. FFRs are due in the JEST grant system after every quarter, and you will have 30 days to submit the report for that quarter. Please be advised that the person designated as a financial manager for your award must complete the FFRs in JEST grants. If this role is not yet designated by your entity for your SAKI award, please complete this action as soon as possible. And if you have any questions about the FFR, please reach out to the Office of the Chief Financial Officer Help Desk, and their information will be provided at the end of this presentation. If you do not have any programmatic or financial activity for your award in this first quarter, you may enter $0 on the FFR. Please note, federal financial report due dates are generally fixed and cannot be adjusted. Late reports submitted after the grace period into JEST grants will automatically result in a freeze of funds placed in your award, which will be removed once the FFR is submitted. Now let's turn our attention to the performance reporting requirement. Next slide, please. To report on the programmatic award activities, you will be using two different systems, the Performance Measurement Tool, PMT system, and the JEST grant system. The PMT reports are due on a quarterly basis, 30 days after the end of each quarter. To report in the PMT, you will need to log into the system and locate the correct report. On a semi-annual basis, you will be required to submit narrative responses in the goals and objectives section, in addition to the quantitative data you report on in the PMT. The narrative responses should cover the two previous quarters. So that's January 1st through June 30th with a due date of July 30th, and July 1st through December 31st with a due date of January 30th. Once you complete the PMT report, you will need to generate a PDF file of that report and attach it to the corresponding performance report in JEST grants. Once that report is submitted in JEST grants, Mila and I will review and either approve the report in JEST grants, or we will request the report back to you in JEST grants with a note on what changes are required. Next slide, please. I wanted to mention that we understand the SAKI PMT reporting requirements are extensive and require a lot of effort on the parts of our grantees. And I want to assure you that your efforts are not in vain. We review and use the data which you report on a regular basis and in a number of different important ways. The data helps us understand your individual progress towards your goals, as well as areas where BJA or RTI can be of assistance. It also helps us evaluate the SAKI program as a whole and allows us to provide accurate responses to data requests from all of our stakeholders, including the public and the U.S. Congress. Finally, it helps us make informed budget decisions, including future funding opportunities. If you are a recipient of multiple SAKI awards under the same program area, your reporting may be especially unique. So we encourage you to reach out to your grant managers with specific questions, and we will help you determine how to report your data most accurately. Next slide, please. So before I jump into the discussion about goals and objectives, we wanted to pause here, and we have a little poll for everyone. And the poll question is, do you understand the requirements of performance reporting under the SAKI program? So yes or no, please enter your responses. And while you're responding to this question, I wanted to mention that we will use these responses to help us determine what type of trainings might be needed in the future. Okay. See the results. Great, that's great. So 95% of you answered yes, you understand the performance reporting requirement, and 5% of you answered no. So for those who answered no, I'm going to hand it over to Mila, who will cover performance reporting more in depth. Next slide, please.
Great, thank you, Lauren. So as Lauren has already mentioned, the quantitative data you report quarterly is invaluable to us for a number of reasons. However, we wanted to also stress the importance of setting clear goals and objectives for your project from the very beginning. Doing so will help your entity clarify problems, issues, and opportunities in your efforts towards sexual assault reform. And just as a reminder, goals are generally broad and longer term in nature, while objectives define the specific strategies to achieve the identified goals in measurable actions in the shorter term. So when thinking about the goals and objectives for your SAKI award, there are a few things to keep in mind. Each of your goals and corresponding objectives are set for the duration of your project and should not change from one reporting period to the next. And we ask that the goals be SMART, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So while goals and objectives remain the same throughout your project, the status of each goal and your progress toward it will most likely change from one reporting period to another. And each semi-annual reporting period, you will need to update the status and the progress toward each one of your goals with a pre-populated option for the status of the goal. And those include not yet started, in progress, delayed, completed, and goal no longer applicable. And the narrative for the progress and barriers section should be detailed and specific and help clarify the quantitative data that you're reporting for that quarter. And then finally, the last question asks about the planned activities toward each goal for the next 6 months. And each one of your goals and progress toward them should be entered as a separate goal in the PMT report. So before I go into providing a few SAKI-specific examples of SMART goals, I wanted to share a few general tips. The PMT does not save your narrative responses in the report from one reporting period to the next. So we recommend that you keep a separate Word document with your goals and objectives so that you can easily update the narrative with your progress and then copy and paste it into the PMT. And if your goals and objectives are ever edited through a change of scope, the updated goals must be reflected in the PMT as well. So meaning if a new goal is added to the project through a change of scope GAM, then it should also be added and reported on in the PMT. And if a goal is no longer applicable to the project, it can be marked as not applicable in the PMT. Next slide, please. So we wanted to provide a few examples of what DGA would consider to be well-developed goals. And as you'll see by these examples, SMART goals and objectives can be written in several different ways. There's really no right or wrong way to develop your goals so long as the SMART aspects are incorporated. So let's look at the example for purpose area 1, which could also be an example for purpose area 2, since they're essentially the same purpose area. So the example here is to eliminate the backlog of previously unsubmitted SAKs by conducting an inventory of all SAKs within the first 6 months of the project and testing all eligible SAKs at a rate of 100 per month. This is a SMART goal because it's specific. It tells us what will be achieved and what actions are needed to get there. It's measurable because it sets a specific number of sexual assault kits to be sent for testing each month. It is time-bound because it sets a specific timeline in which to complete the inventory. And in the purpose area 3 example, the structure of the goal is a little different here, where the broad goal is written separately from the specific objectives needed to achieve it. So here the goal is to increase the efficacy of national DNA databases by collecting, testing, and uploading DNA samples from convicted offenders who legally owe DNA. The objectives for this goal are to conduct a comprehensive census within the first year of the project to identify eligible convicted offenders who could be linked with the jurisdiction's previously unsubmitted SAKs and who should have samples encoded. To formulate a DNA collection plan within the first year of the project that will target the collection of DNA from convicted offenders who have a high likelihood of being linked to cases associated with the jurisdiction's unsubmitted sexual assault kits. and to collect, test, and upload to CODIS lawfully owed DNA samples from convicted offenders who are confirmed as not in CODIS and who legally owe DNA. This is a SMART goal because it is specific. We know what the intended outcome is, which is to increase the efficacy of national DNA databases. It is also measurable and time-bound. We know what actions need to take place and what the timeline for each one is. Next slide, please. So a SMART goal and objectives for purpose area 4 might look like, the goal is to facilitate a coordinated community response to sexual assault through a victim-centered approach by achieving the following objectives. Form within the first year of the project and maintain an MVP group to oversee the investigation and prosecution of cases, victim engagement, and services. To investigate, prosecute cases through to final adjudication throughout the project period. To launch a public awareness campaign within 6 months to receiving the grant to keep the public updated on the sexual assault reform efforts and to encourage victim engagement. To engage with victims on a rolling basis as appropriate to provide support and services throughout the investigation, prosecution of cases resulting from the sexual assault kit testing. In this example, again, the goal is broader in nature, but then each of the objectives is specific, time-bound, measurable, etc. Next slide, please. An example of a SMART goal for purpose area 5 could be to implement sustainable changes in policies and procedures that ensure unsubmitted kits never accumulate again, enhance overall response to sexually motivated crimes, and maintain a victim-centered focus. And the objectives for this area could be to develop policies and procedures that require all law enforcement agencies to submit newly collected sexual assault kits to a forensic crime laboratory within 30 days and require the forensic lab to test the submitted kits within a specified time frame. Require mandatory training for all law enforcement officers on sexually motivated crimes. Require a victim advocate to be available to all survivors of sexually motivated crime. Next slide, please. And finally, an example of a well-established goal for purpose area 6 might look like to implement a comprehensive approach to resolve violent crime cold cases, which are not sexually motivated. And the objectives might be to inventory all unresolved violent crime cold cases in the jurisdiction's possession within the first 6 months of the project period, create within the first 6 months a multidisciplinary working group that convenes regularly to identify and address the individual, organizational, and systemic factors that led to the high number of unresolved violent crime cold cases in the jurisdiction, and to establish and implement processes that prioritize the investigation and adjudication of violent crime cold cases identified through the inventory. So we wanted to point out here that the PMT report for purpose area 6 is currently still under development, and until the PMT reporting is established in the system, grantee should fill out the PDF of the purpose area 6 questions and submit that as an attachment in the Just Grants reports that are due semi-annually. And the PDF of the questions can be found at this link here. But if you have any questions about, how to report on this area specifically or PMT reporting in general, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us. And again, these are obviously just examples. Each one of you is doing unique work in your jurisdictions under each one of your awards. And so your goals and objectives will reflect that. Your performance report is really an opportunity for you to share your success and challenges with us. It's one of the only windows for us to really see truly the impact that you're having on your communities. And so we urge you to please take the time to develop your goals and objectives from the very beginning of the project and report out on those to us in your PMT reports. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany to talk us through some budget considerations. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Mila. As we mentioned, most SAKI budgets were change requested to grantees for revision. As you work to revise your budgets, there are a few key notes to consider. In general, allowable costs for all non-federal entities are those costs consistent with the principles set out in the Uniform Guidance 2 CFR subsection 200, subpart E, and those permitted by the grant programs authorizing legislation. To be allowable under federal awards, costs must be reasonable, allocable, and necessary to the project, and they must also comply with the funding statute and agency requirements. We strongly encourage you to reference the DOJ Financial Guide as well as the SAKI solicitation on a regular basis when deciding if certain expenditures are allowed under your award. Additionally, please reach out to Mila or Lauren with any questions you might have, and together with our policy office colleagues, we'll provide you with the most accurate assessment on whether those costs are allowable under SAKI. Let's talk about some allowable uses of funding. We highlighted some here, but you can also reference the FY2023 SAKI solicitation to learn more about specific uses of funding under the purpose area for your award. Some examples for allowable expenditures include personnel costs, either through a newly created position or overtime for existing personnel, travel expenses needed to complete approved grant activities, and costs to produce or enhance necessary protocols and policies to address the gaps in sexual assault response in your community. SAKI funds may also be used to directly cover the cost for testing of facts, secondary evidence, or FCG efforts. Additionally, SAKI funds may be used to pay for a victim advocate to assist victims while your jurisdiction is engaging with the victims whose facts are being tested. Some unallowable uses of SAKI funds include victim services, such as emergency financial aid, shelter, food, and transportation costs not related to their case, lab equipment, testing of current facts, and investigations and prosecutions of current sexual assault cases. However, in certain circumstances, we do make exceptions here. For instance, when there is a serious threat to public safety or a current case is thought to be linked to a cold case or serial offender, these costs could be considered allowable. If you have any questions, please reach out to your grant manager. Next slide, please. A few more budget items for consideration. If you have budgeted for indirect costs, please be sure to submit and have a current and approved indirect cost rate agreement. Please keep in mind that all training requests require prior BGA approval for each specific training. Some other allowable uses of funding also include costs to collect and test lawfully owed DNA from offenders or arrestees, and allocation to attend the annual BJA SAKI grantees meeting. We also wanted to recognize that although the allowable use of SAKI funding towards victim services is limited, we understand the importance of the victim-centered approach to sexual assault reform. As such, we wanted to encourage you to research other funding opportunities offered through the Office for Victims of Crime, OVC, and the Office on Violence Against Women, OVW. Now, as we just covered the SAKI grant program requirements, we want to turn your attention to some of the grant management aspects of your award. Next slide, please. In this next section, we wanted to talk through some administrative aspects of the grant management best practices, including the publication review process, grant award modifications, BJA grant monitoring, differences between subawards and contracts, subrecipient policies and procedures, and procurement guidelines. Now we will hear from Lauren on the publication review process. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Tiffany. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, all grantees have the following award condition applied, which states that the recipient agrees to submit to BJA for review and approval any curricula, training materials, proposed publications, reports, or any other written materials that will be published, including web-based materials and website content through funds from this grant at least 30 working days prior to the targeted dissemination date. As stated in this award condition, you are required to have the following disclosure or statement included in your publication. I won't read out the entire statement or disclosure you need to have in your publication. However, you can review it on this slide, and it is also listed in your award agreement. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines the entire publication review process. You will see that grantees are required to submit their documents to RTI, copying your BJA grant manager for initial review at least 45 days prior to the dissemination date. RTI will conduct their review and send it on to BJA to conduct our review. BJA will then send our feedback and/or comments to RTI, where RTI will then provide all feedback to the grantee, and you will have 7 business days to address that feedback. Once all feedback is addressed, RTI will notify the grantee once we provide final approval. And as a final step, the grantee should submit the final version of the approved publication as a deliverable under their award. Now let's turn our attention to grant award modifications, or GAMs. Next slide, please. We understand that there will be times when certain changes or corrections may need to be made to your award throughout the project period. BJA requires that all requests are submitted through Just Grants by initiating a GAM. No changes to your award are official until they are submitted and approved through Just Grants. And there are 3 main types of GAMs that can be submitted in Just Grants: programmatic and financial GAMs, and project period extension GAMs, which will be covered in the next slide. There are 2 types of programmatic GAMs that may be requested: a change of scope GAM and a programmatic cost GAM for costs that require prior approval. And there are different types of financial GAMs that may be submitted. All of the FY23 SAKI grantees have their budget clearance GAM change requested to address BJA and OCFO feedback. It's important to note that your application budget is not approved by BJA until the budget clearance GAM has received final approval and the award withhold has been lifted. If you have not already done so, please work on getting your budget clearance GAMs approved by BJA. A budget modification GAM may be submitted by your agency at any time if you need to make changes to your approved budget that require reallocation of funds between categories, moving funds into a category which did not previously have funds allocated, or making changes to your indirect cost category. Additional information on when a budget modification GAM may be required for submission can be found in the DOJ Financial Guide. A sole source GAM is another financial GAM type in which may be submitted to request approval of a sole source contract in excess of the simplified acquisition threshold currently set at $250,000. Next slide, please. The last GAM type is a project period extension GAM. Per 2 CFR 200, federal grant recipients are allowed a one-time project period extension of up to 12 months. In certain extenuating circumstances, a second extension may be allowed. We recommend you reach out to your grant manager first before submitting the request in Just Grants to discuss the eligibility of an extension for your award. Additionally, as a best practice, we recommend that you reach out to your grant manager to clarify exactly what type of supporting documentation is required for a particular GAM before submitting it into Just Grants to minimize the back and forth in the system. Also, please note that no GAMs will be approved if you are delinquent on any reporting requirements until those delinquent reports have been submitted. And finally, each GAM goes through numerous levels of approval and sometimes requires changes. So please ensure that you allow sufficient time. We generally recommend up to 1 month for review and approval. Once a GAM is approved, you will receive a notice through Just Grants. And now I'm going to turn it back to Mila, who will talk more about monitoring. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Lauren. So next, we wanted to touch up on BJA's monitoring requirements. BJA conducts frequent monitoring of grant recipients to ensure they're meeting programmatic, administrative, and fiscal requirements of their award. And some types of monitoring that we conduct include desk reviews, remote in-depth monitoring or site visits, and review of performance reports as discussed earlier. We conduct the desk reviews annually, which include a review of your compliance to date. For example, ensuring your performance and financial reports are submitted on time, that all the withholdings have been addressed, etc. During your project period, your agency may also be selected for an in-depth monitoring, which can be conducted at any point during the grant project period and up to 3 years after the end of the grant period. And if selected by the programs office or the Office of Chief Financial Officer, which is OCFO. And should your agency be selected for in-depth monitoring, we will work with you to conduct a review of the financial, administrative, and programmatic aspects of your award management. Remote monitoring and site visits also offer an opportunity for you to request any TTA and for us to get to know your program on a much deeper level. Next slide, please. So before we move on, we have another quick poll question for you. And the question is, what aspect of grant administration does your agency find the most challenging or confusing? And the options are subrecipient management requirements, procurement transactions, difference between subaward and procurement contracts, and reporting requirements. Okay, let's see the results. So there's a little bit of everything. It seems, like cyber management requirements is an area, as well as procurement transactions. It looks like most of you know the difference between subaward and procurement contracts, which is great. And reporting requirements is the largest area where you might want to see more information. Next slide, please. So there are several common areas of noncompliance that we often note during our monitoring efforts, and we wanted to discuss a few of those with you today just to make you aware. One of the most common issues that we note is that the grant award administrator and financial manager have not completed the financial management and grant administration training within 120 days of receiving the award. And as mentioned earlier, this particular requirement is also a standard award condition on all OJP awards. And I wanted to just note that non-compliance of this requirement will result in your funds being frozen. And one thing I also wanted to mention is that in addition to ensuring that the grant award administrator and financial manager complete the training within 120 days of receiving a new award, you should also make sure to have that done if a new grant award administrator or financial manager takes on that role. The second area of noncompliance is adherence to the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, or FFATA, which mandates that the prime grant recipient, which is all of you, file a FFATA subaward report by the end of the month following the month on which the prime recipient, again, you guys, awards any subaward greater than or equal to $30,000. And this is done in the FFATA subaward reporting system, or FSRS. And we include several resources on the FFATA requirements, both on this slide and at the end of the presentation. We also often note that the grant recipients misclassify subawards and procurement contracts. And in fact, this area of award administration has caused so much confusion throughout the years that OJP has developed several resources to help the recipients make the correct determination. And it's really important to do so because very different sets of rules govern each relationship. So we provide links to those resources at the end of this webinar as well. Please also note that recipients of federal grants are responsible for making the determination if the pass-through funding is to be considered a subaward or a procurement contract and documenting that in your award file. Next slide, please. Additionally, during in-depth monitoring, we often observe that grantees do not maintain sufficient subrecipient policies and procedures. Grantees must maintain written policies and procedures for its subrecipient award process to ensure that it meets the requirements as laid out in 2 CFR 200.303 and 200.331. And these policies and procedures should have specific sections that address pre-award and post-award responsibilities. And we'll discuss those in a little bit more detail in just a bit. And then finally, in-depth monitoring often reveals that the procurement contracts were awarded without adequate competition. Again, as a reminder, all procurement transactions under the federal awards must be conducted in a manner that provides for full and open competition, consistent with the procurement standards. And again, we'll touch on this in just a little bit. So I'll hand it over to Tiffany now to talk about the difference between awards and procurement contracts. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Mila. As Mila just mentioned, a common area of noncompliance is when grantees misclassify subawards and procurement contracts. So let's review the differences between the two. OJP grantees often turn to other non-federal entities to provide goods and services in order to fulfill their responsibilities under their award. They accomplish this through the use of subawards and procurement contracts. There are significant differences between a subaward and a procurement contract, including how those entities are selected and monitored. OJP has developed the following guidance documents to help clarify the differences between subawards and procurement contracts and outline the compliance and reporting requirements for each. This information can be accessed in these resources listed on this slide. Next slide, please. Here we lay out some key distinctions between subawards and contractors. A subaward is for the purpose of carrying out a portion of a federal award and creates a federal assistance relationship between the recipient and the subrecipient. Subrecipients may have one or more of the following characteristics as listed in this slide. Adversely, a contract is for the purpose of obtaining goods and services for the recipient's own use and creates a procurement relationship between the recipient and the contractor. A contractor relationship may have one or more of the characteristics we list here on this slide. To note, we provide additional guidance and resources on how to make this determination towards the end of the presentation, and we have previously recorded more detailed webinars on this topic. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of subaward and procurement contracts under the SAKI program. Examples of subawards include funding a rape crisis center to provide services and/or advocacy, funding a district attorney's office to prosecute cold cases resulting from testing of facts, funding a research partner to conduct data analysis. Examples of procurement contracts under the SAKI program include contracting with a commercial lab to test the SAC, contracting with an IT vendor to build out a SAC tracking system, contracting with a staffing agency to help meet project staffing needs. Now we will hear from Lauren about subrecipient policies and procedures. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Tiffany. So as we just touched upon subawards, I wanted to discuss subrecipient policies and procedures. The pass-through entity must develop and maintain written policies and procedures for its subrecipient award process to ensure it meets the requirements as laid out in 2 CFR 200. These policies and procedures should have specific sections around pre-award and post-award responsibilities and include a process for closing out subawards. Policies and procedures must be in writing and clearly describe the pass-through entity's responsibilities for managing subrecipient activities throughout the award lifecycle. Mila and I have actually recorded a subrecipient policies and procedures webinar where we have an in-depth discussion on this requirement. And we highly recommend any grantee who have subrecipients allocated in their budgets to review this webinar. Now let's discuss procurement, another important area of compliance. Next slide, please. As Tiffany just reviewed characteristics of a contract, I also wanted to talk about procurement requirements using federal funds. As a reminder, all procurement transactions must be conducted in a manner to provide practical, open, and free competition. Grantees should follow their local state guidelines for procurement. All non-federal entities should have written procedures for procurement transactions and should follow those procedures when procuring goods with federal funds. But it is also important to note that the local policies do not contradict federal guidelines or impose less stringent guidelines and thresholds. When deciding on a procurement method, an agency timeline is not a factor for compliance. Next slide, please. So there are certain circumstances that may call for other than full and open competition. These circumstances may result in sole sourcing contracting. To request advance approval from OJP to use a non-competitive approach for a procurement contract that would exceed the simplified acquisition threshold of $250,000, the recipient must submit a justification for use of a non-competitive approach through a sole source GAM submission in JETS grants, as discussed earlier in this presentation. In general, grantees may make the initial determination that competition is not feasible if one of the following circumstances exist. 1, the item of service is available only from a single source. 2, the public emergency for the requirement will not permit a delay resulting from a competitive solicitation. And 3, after solicitation of a number of sources, competition is considered inadequate. Please note any sole source contracting that does not exceed the $250,000 threshold for approval should still follow the OJP financial guide requirements and be properly documented. Next slide, please. So as part of your procurement process, it's important to note that documentation is crucial, and you as a grantee must ensure you maintain all procurement-related documentation for BJA review. Regardless of the need for approval, all procurement decisions should be documented and evidence maintained for review in your award file. We outline some of this documentation that should be maintained on this slide, and so please review this as needed. Now I will hand it back to Mila to discuss closeouts. Next slide.
Great, thank you so much, Lauren. So finally, we wanted to touch upon the closeout of your award, and we realized that you just received this grant, and so closeout of the award is in the distant future, but we just wanted to briefly mention it here anyway. There are basically two types of closeouts that are initiated in the JUST grant system. In a standard closeout, the grantee, you, initiates a closeout of the award within 120 calendar days after the project period end date. And during these 120 days, you must ensure that all administrative, programmatic, and financial requirements have been met, and all obligated expenditures are paid out. Important to note here is that all expenses must be obligated by the last day of the project period. And JUST grants system will begin notifying the grantee 60 days prior to the project period end date that the closeout is coming up. An administrative closeout is initiated in two instances, automatically on the 121st day after the project period end date, or if the grantee is unwilling or is non-compliant or unable to complete the closeout requirements. And at the initiation of the administrative closeout, all grant funds are frozen. So if you have any questions about the closeout process or timeline, please don't hesitate to reach out to your grant manager. Next slide, please. And lastly, we understand that navigating the JUST grant system can be tricky at times, and therefore OJP has developed several resources to help grantees navigate the JUST grant system. We encourage you to take the time to review and leverage the various resources available to you to best use the system and execute basic functions. And these resources include videos, job aids, and more on the procedures for the entity management, award acceptance, and grant modification. And we included those slides here. So I know we just covered quite a bit of ground, so we compiled the next two slides with additional resources on each of the topics we just covered, including subawards, procurement contracts, subrecipient monitoring, policies and procedures, and resources specific to the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative program. We also included contact information for each of the various systems that you will use, including the JUST grant system, ASAP, the PMT, as well as links to the SAKI BGA and the TTA website and ways that you can stay connected with BGA. And lastly, we included our contact information here for the BGA team. And should you have any questions, definitely feel free to contact us directly. And with that, I will hand it back over to Chris with RTI.
Thanks, Mila. I'm going to give everyone 10 or 15 seconds to take a picture if you guys want. Otherwise, you'll see contact information shared in various forms, I'm sure. Transitioning into the TTA side of things, training and technical assistance. Really appreciate all our presenters from BJA giving us that helpful information. But now I would like to introduce Dr. Kevin Strom, first acknowledging that points of user opinions in these following slides are those of the author and don't necessarily represent the US DOJ. Dr. Strom is the Center Director at RTI International, where he leads the Center for Public Safety and Resilience, which conducts research, technical assistance, and training across a range of topics related to policing, investigations, and violence prevention. His portfolio includes projects focused on the United States as well as internationally. Dr. Strom has led projects for the US DOJ, including work aimed at improving the response to violent crime through enhanced investigative practices and community partnerships. He currently leads the national SAKI TTA project, which is supporting the state and local jurisdictions from across the country in testing, investigating, and prosecuting cases associated with previously unsubmitted SACs. He also leads the National Case Closed Project, a nationwide effort designed to support law enforcement agencies in improving their violent crime clearance rates with an emphasis on fatal and non-fatal shooting cases. Without further ado, I'd like to pass it off to Dr. Strom.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and hi everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, want to give a quick overview of the SAKI Training and Technical Assistance Program that has been in place since SAKI started in 2015. So want to try and leave some time for Q&A, so I'll probably go through these a little quickly. But one thing to highlight is the program's been around since 2015 and it's grown steadily over that time. 90 sites at the state and local level. And as you can see, good representation from across the United States. SAKI now has a presence in 43 states in the District of Columbia, and some are larger jurisdictions, some mid-sized and smaller ones. So, we have a strong history of supporting a range of different types of jurisdictions and their goals as part of the program. Go to the next slide, please. So, one of the things we really strive to do is provide customized TTA to support each of you in terms of your goals and objectives for your SAKI program. Long-term needs as well, including capacity building, interagency coordination, and strategic priorities, but also cross-site linking sites together. That is a tremendous benefit. Providing materials that align and help you directly in terms of aligning with policy and your implementation needs, and that align with evidence-based practices in the field. So, we do that in a variety of ways. We have a national multidisciplinary team with deep expertise in all those topics listed on the left there. We do that. We support SAKI sites through virtually and in person. We've conducted a range of site visits, on-site technical assistance trainings that include large-scale and smaller events, and then written documents, webinars, and other types of things that directly serve practitioners in the field. We have a great team in terms of partners that we work with, and we've worked with since the inception of the project. IECP and Equitas, our law enforcement and prosecution partners, Michigan State University supporting with research partnerships, and then Project Cold Case, Joyful Heart, and RAIN, which provide advocacy support and guidance. So, one of the things we really strive to do is to make sure that you have, the support you need for the things you're working through within your SAKI programs. We have subject matter experts with deep expertise in areas of law enforcement investigations, forensic science, and other topics as your primary points of contact, and then a team of qualified experts, internal and external to RTI, that we work together to support SAKI goals. And so we do that for a variety of ways, but it's really what we strive for is a flexible TTA process and being timely and responsive. So really a one-stop shop. You can contact your point of contact, and we can help go from there in terms of helping address your needs, whether they're small scale or longer term, and planning out your goals too over the course of your program. A few things you can look to, immediately. One is the SAKI website that also includes our virtual academy and our SAKI toolkit. A lot of great resources that we continue to build on over time. So I encourage you to check out the website, and then you'll see the virtual academy and the toolkit as resources within the website, including information on all SAKI sites. And then a few additional resources, Lawfully Owed DNA. There's a specific spot on the website to look for more information on that for those purpose area grantees. Other violent cold case crimes, similarly, some specific resources there. And then also the program around enhancing conviction integrity through forensics that looks at supporting training for attorneys trying violent crime cases to provide that forensic proficiency. Also, we have a number of different working groups that all SAKI sites are available to join. These all meet multiple times a year, some more frequently than others, and across a range of different topics. So those are things that you can be on the lookout for. A lot of great cross collaboration going on in those working groups, and all SAKI sites are welcome to pop in and listen in or participate. So what's next? You will be hearing from your folks on our SAKI team, the regional team lead and members, and you also first get the SAKI welcome packet. So those are a few things just to be on the lookout for. The welcome packet includes a lot of great resources, and then our large annual event, our SAKI grantees meeting. We're planning that currently, and that'll be an in-person event. And we don't have a specific date yet, but we're planning that for the summer of 2024. So those are just a few things to keep on the lookout for. Contact information here, and again, you'll be hearing from our regional teams, but otherwise I will turn it back over to you, Chris, and maybe a few minutes for Q&A.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate your insight from the TTA side of it. Reiterating thanks again to the BJA staff as well. At this point, we'd like to encourage attendees to type any questions in the Q&A feature. We don't have any at this time, but while folks are typing in potential questions, I'd like to just open the floor to any of our presenters today to see if there's any thoughts you'd like to reiterate, or maybe anything you may have left out that you'd like to add in now. Let me take back that offer. Our first question has come in. How do we access the PMT?
I can take that question on. I'm sorry, I think my computer might have frozen, but I called in. So let me know if you guys can't hear me. Otherwise,
we can.
We can. Okay, great. So it's through the PMT website. We included the link to that in the presentation. But if you don't know, how to get to the website, reach out to your grant manager, and they can definitely send you the link to the website. You'll need to create an account and log in, and that should give you access. And Lauren, Tiffany, anything else you wanted to add?
All right. No additional questions at this time. Given that we are a couple minutes to the top of the hour, we're going to go ahead and launch our feedback poll questions. Please do take a moment to fill these out. These are part of a requirement we have to provide BJA with insight as to what attendees thought about our performance from the webinar execution side of it. But please do feel free to continue typing questions in if you have them for our presenters today. All righty, well, we still do not have any questions in the queue at this time, but just as a quick reminder, just kidding. That's exactly what I was about to say. Will these slides be made available? Yes, so that's the reminder I was about to provide. We did record this webinar today. A PDF of the slide deck will be sent out, as well as a link to this recording once it's posted online to everyone who has registered for the event. So be on the lookout for that. We usually try to do that within 2 or 3 business days. So look to the end of this week or potentially early next week for that email to go out. If for some reason you are not sent that email or can't locate it, just reach out to your point of contact on the TTA side of it, and we'll get you what you need. All right, no further questions at this time. So as I mentioned, be on the lookout for the e-blast that will go out with today's materials, but just wanted to extend another thank you to all of our presenters today, BJA and Dr. Strom from RTI. We really appreciate your insight. And on behalf of the RTI team, we're certainly excited to work with you all moving forward and congratulate you on your award. That's all we have for today. Unless anyone from BJA has additional thoughts, we can go ahead and close out. All righty. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great afternoon.